That which hides in darkness is best known by being brought into the light. Secret societies and mystical orders have existed since the dawn of time. Some orders, such as the Essenes of John the Baptist, existed for the selfless betterment of humanity, whereas other orders, such as the Solar Temple, existed for the selfish benefit of a few. More recently, through pop culture, esoteric traditions have been lumped together, creating a veil of ambiguity, leaving most people to believe that they are all subversive and manipulative with political agendas. The best example of this is the modern mythos of the Illuminati, an alleged secret order hell-bent on controlling the world. Meanwhile, real such efforts on the behalf of globalization and progressive movements wear the veil of innocence, as the general public is unaware of their true subversive nature. As a metaphor, Jim Henson's classic, The Dark Crystal, captures the struggle between good and evil secret orders through the struggle for power between the Skeksis and the mystics over the Dark Crystal. To quote Jeremy Preston, "To rid ourselves of our shadows, who we are, we must step into either total light or total darkness." In this two-part series, we will examine the struggle between good and evil to influence society, and how modern culture is being affected by this Manichaean dilemma. Los Angeles, California is home to a vast number of secret societies, New Age organizations, and satanic cults. There's even a bus tour. At the center of academic research into occult manuscripts, sacred rites, and rituals was the book collector Manly P. Hall. Friend to renowned academics, celebrities, and politicians, Hall amassed the largest collection of rare esoteric books and manuscripts in North America into what became the Philosophical Research Society and Library. People such as Carl Jung and Helen Keller came here to study these rare works. During World War II, President Roosevelt had the entire library placed on microfiche and stored in the Library of Congress to preserve it in the event the Japanese attacked the West Coast. It's essentially a miniature Library of Alexandria, keeping record of ancient history and literature and manuscripts that are hundreds and hundreds of years old. So it's pretty amazing. They do have like old versions of King James Bibles, they have Shakespearean works, they have pretty much some of the most esoteric and amazing pieces of history and relics. Now, although they do also have these satanic manuscripts and stuff that dabbles in black magic, these are kept there for purposes of history, of records. It's so that people can know what it is when they see it. It's how to identify what it is. So it's pretty amazing. We're very honored to be able to actually go in and see inside PRS. Manly P. Hall was a proponent of spiritual learning, but he was a great opponent of sorcery and dark magic. He was a contemporary with Aleister Crowley, and he made sure he let everyone know that he believed Crowley to be a con man. In fact, he actually kept one of Crowley's pedo poems in his desk so that if anybody ever came around wanting to learn about Aleister Crowley or follow in Aleister Crowley's teachings, he would pull out this poem to try and dissuade people away from following Aleister Crowley's demented beliefs.
But do you remember what Manly P. Hall's position was on Aleister Crowley?
Yeah.
Some of that stuff, because that's being popularized again. I was curious what.
He's against it. He kept some of those books, Crowley, but he would not allow anyone to read it. He was totally against it.
Well, wasn't some of it because Aleister Crowley was a pederast and that type of thing, and just...
Yeah, he didn't have any real discretion. Well, he just wouldn't allow people to read it.
And didn't Manly try to accumulate some of the works that have dark arts in it and black magic to kind of keep those things out of circulation? And
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
So Manly P. Hall was against the sorcery and against black magic. There were instances where people actually were trying to steal these works. They were trying to break into the library. He had a lot of problems with these satanic cult groups trying to get their hands on these ancient manuscripts, not to study it, not to know about it, not to keep a record of history, but to actually go and enact the rituals because they themselves bought into and believed in black magic. Hall kept files of what he referred to as con artists, people who used occult doctrines for profit, such as fortune tellers, seance performers, and dark arts practitioners. Hall dissuaded the curiosity seekers from going down the wrong path, similar to how Dwight D. Eisenhower had photos taken from concentration camps to evidence to the world the great tragedy of the Holocaust. Hall accumulated a large collection of evil literature for the academic purpose of knowing how evil human beings can truly be. Hall also wanted to keep these types of manuscripts out of the hands of the satanic cults and practitioners of black magic to prevent society and pop culture from heading down the wrong path, while he exalted the virtues of the Greek mysteries, Renaissance, alchemists, and sacred religious teachings from culture around the world and through the ages.
To study our heritage from the past is not simply a waste of time, because most of that heritage is still with us. If not in the political and social circles of life, at least in the internal, subjective moods of our own existence. As time went on and religions and philosophies became more complicated, it was inevitable that efforts should be made to rationalize faith. But today we are in a little difficulty. Knowing that faith basically is the very cornerstone of survival, we find that many forms of knowledge, particularly scientific knowledge, exist largely to destroy faith. They want to take away from us the belief in those very invisible principles upon which we have learned to depend for peace of soul and peace of mind and peace of heart. It is true that God bestows life and is the final source of all. But the good life seems to come to those who make certain additional contributions to their own salvation. So the conscience becomes the symbol for, as it says in Hamlet, for conscience doth make cowards of us all. Every time we outrage conscience, we suffer. Every time we go against it, we regret it. And yet, in many cases, conscience is something we would love to forget. We wish we could go against it, because it interferes with so many things that we want to do. But what are the things that it interferes with? We now realize more and more that the things it interferes with are things that we should not do. Once we begin to deceive or corrupt our integrities, it becomes easier and easier. And false guidance comes to us. A false guidance which is largely the result of the pressure from the outside, so that we divide between the guardian angel and the guardian on the threshold in this way, that one, the guardian angel, represents the descent of spiritual grace. The other, the guardian on the threshold, is a false concept or false standard of integrity that is built upon the contamination by worldliness. Now, selfishness, of course, is toxic. All negative vibrations are toxic. Everything that we shouldn't do and we insist on doing is a damage to the whole composite nature with which we were endowed. Therefore, that we all are trying to do is to find the courage to follow conscience, to follow the integrities of life, and to go on according to the spirit of our faith, a spirit which depends for its perfection, its manifestation, and its fulfillment upon us. There is nothing to be gained by perpetuating evil. It becomes perhaps the fulfillment of the whole story that we recognize in the life of Christ, who came to protect people, to save humanity from the weaknesses of their own natures. And this process of saving is not to be fulfilled or cannot be fulfilled unless the Christ in you performs the labor.
Manly P. Hall was surrounded by those who wrongfully sought to use the occult for power, personal gain, and to live forever. He would eventually play victim to what his widow referred to as a satanic murder. Con men looking to obtain possession of rare alchemy books alleged to contain the elixir of life took advantage of Hall in his later years and murdered him, seeking the secret knowledge of immortality. Through nasty court battles and investigations into Hall's untimely death, his widow sold some of these sought-after alchemical manuscripts to the Getty Museum, where they were reposed as a private collection under lock and key. Through nasty court battles and investigations into Manly P. Hall's untimely death, his widow sold some of these alchemy manuscripts to the Getty Museum, where we are at right now, where they've been kept safe and under lock and key. However, we have been able to obtain digital copies of these manuscripts, and I must warn you, these are graphic and they are not for the faint of heart. Many of these manuscripts are hundreds of years old, and they contain what elite believe to be the secret of immortality. Before proceeding, we must first have a basic understanding of alchemy, the esoteric literature that surrounds it, and how it has been misused throughout the ages on into modern times. Much of ancient knowledge, wisdom, and understanding made its way into European culture by way of the Ottoman Empire through the intermingling of European, Asian, and Middle Eastern secret societies. The Dark Ages were transformed, bridging classic antiquity with the modern era by way of the Renaissance through people like Leonardo da Vinci, who traveled to ancient Anatolia, now modern Turkey. Thus, the word alchemy, or alchemia, is the Arabic word for chemistry. Charlatans, frustrated with their inability to rectify the wisdom and understanding of the ancient mysteries, turned them into parlor tricks for the amusement of unenlightened elites seeking more power. Desperate attempts at immortality and fortune turned the provocative symbols of alchemy into tools of torture. This image, dated around 1800, is a facsimile of an early work by Nicholas Flamel, circa 1400. As legend would hold, Flamel learned the secrets of immortality through his personal study of alchemy and lived to be over 200 years old. Flamel's own description of this image goes as follows.
There is a king with a great sword, who made to be killed in his presence by some soldiers a great multitude of little infants, whose mothers wept at the feet of the unpitiful soldiers, the blood of which infants was afterwards by other soldiers gathered up and put in a great vessel, wherein the sun and the moon came to bathe themselves. and because that this history did represent the more part of that of the innocent slain by Herod, and that in this book I learned the greatest part of the art, these hieroglyphic symbols of this secret science, I will not represent unto you that which was written in good and intelligible Latin, for God would punish me, because I should commit a greater wickedness than he who wished that all the men of the world had but one head, that he might cut it off with one blow. Having with me, therefore, this fair book, I did nothing else day nor night but study upon it, understanding very well all the operations that it showed, that taught the philosopher's stone.
Alchemy has always been a veiled craft with obscure images interpretable only by those initiated into their true meaning. The legend surrounding the philosopher's stone suggests that it is the secret elixir of life, giving immortality to those whom discover it. Experts on the subject argue that these alchemical illustrations are metaphoric for the process of transforming the human condition from a state of ignorance and the fear of physical mortality through an enlightened awakening into the spiritual immortality of the soul, liberating one's own consciousness, thereby transcending the fear of death. Thus, the gift offered by the philosopher's stone is purely metaphysical and not physical, corresponding with the soul and not the body. Rosicrucianism, which is the Christianization of alchemy, uses the philosopher's stone as a symbol of Jesus Christ as the secret to salvation. Nevertheless, perverted interpretations of alchemy find their way into sorcery and black magic by those seeking its powers for personal gain. In an interpretation which comes much later, the philosopher's stone is a jewel from Lucifer's crown, which gave him great powers. In a heavenly battle between angels, the jewel was broken off and fell to earth from heaven. It has been mythologized to give powers of fame, fortune, and immortality to those who find it. The true interpretation of this image is simple. There is a choice between vice or virtue, succumbing to desire or following one's conscience, seeking personal gain through the sacrifice of others, slaughtering innocents in order to gain temporary satisfaction at the cost of losing one's soul. We can see how the perverted interpretation of alchemy could compel the power-hungry to engage in grotesque, ritualistic behavior. For example, Gilles de Rais, a 15th century leader in the French army, sought after individuals who knew alchemy and how to summon demons. He desired occult powers for personal gain. Ultimately, he was put to death after confessing to pedophilia and the gruesome murder of hundreds of children. The Countess Elizabeth Bathory, known as the Blood Countess, was a Hungarian noblewoman deemed the greatest serial killer of all time, having taken baths in human blood to retain her beauty and youth. She is compared to Vlad the Impaler as contributing to the legends of vampires. In the late 19th and early 20th century, people such as Aleister Crowley created their own debased versions of the occult, dominating through popular culture the more profound and authentic appreciation of the ancients by people like Manly P. Hall.
Aleister Crowley, the man who called himself the Beast 666, black magician, drug fiend, sex addict.
To hell with Christianity, rationalism, Buddhism. I want blasphemy, murder, rape, revolution.
Aleister Crowley declared the death of Christianity. He was to be the new Messiah that would replace the pallid dead Christ.
Since his death in 1947, Crowley has become an icon of rebellion. The great beast died in 1947. Crowley had pushed the same boundaries 40 years earlier. He was now a 60s icon.
From the 1960s into the 21st century, satanic rites and rituals began to flourish, surfacing in pop culture as newfangled expressions of profanity. We can see the more modern expressions of this sick and twisted superstition with the use of blood transfusions from children and babies by the elite, and/or aborted fetal tissue to extend one's life beyond the pitfalls of mortality. Though most who study the occult and New Age philosophy themselves are not evil, this is occultism's dark secret. In the next part of this series, we shall examine how evil is being used to dominate our culture through a subversive plan to change the cultural landscape of society, targeting children and young adults with sophisticated propaganda. This is Millie Weaver reporting for Infowars.com.
Today we call it bone broth, and for thousands of years our ancestors enjoyed its benefits before it became lost to our modern diets of processed junk. We are now introducing Caveman by InfoWarsLife.com, the ultimate in true paleo nutrition with bone broth, turmeric root, chaga mushroom, and 7 total primal superfoods in a single great tasting formula. Caveman. It's those people living in the wilds having to actually build civilization that are our superior ancestors, and we need to do everything we can to recapture that. Everyone knew that you used all the parts of the animal. You used the meat for sustenance, the fat for cooking, but you used the bones for strength. From the outside structure full of minerals and key cofactors to the marrow that produces the blood for the body, this is the engine of the life essence. I'm a long way from the caveman my ancestors were, but I'm sure as hell trying to get back to that essence that made us what we were, and this is a big part of it. I know you're going to want to check out Caveman Ultimate Paleo Formula for yourself at InfoWarsLife.com today.